Are you interested in saving a few $100s when you service your vehicles this year? Hi, my name is Kevin, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to rebuild a carburetor. Many people have several vehicles and machines around the house that still have a carburetor as opposed to electronic fuel injection. Just to name a few of these, things like wave runners, boats, dirt bikes, snowmobiles, and even some smaller machines like lawnmowers and chainsaws can have carburetors. So if you own a vehicle or machine with a carbureted engine, you've probably noticed the performance tends to get worse and worse over time, and it never runs the same as when you first bought it. Carburetors eventually need to be rebuilt, which is usually a very expensive task to have a shop to do it. However, if you have some good attention to detail and you take your time, rebuilding a carburetor is actually a very easy procedure. This particular rebuild that I'm going to show you how to perform costs anywhere from $600 to $1,000 depending on the shop that's going to do the work for you. So first, let me explain why carburetors need to be rebuilt. Most fuel systems today have inline fuel filters or in-tank fuel filters somewhere in them to help filter out the dirt and other contaminants that get into your tank. Some of these contaminants will get by the filter, and a lot of these carbs have very small passages that will somehow collect some of the dirt and debris in them. Another way carburetors get ruined is if you leave gas in them or your vehicle's tank for an extended period of time. Gasoline is a very highly refined product. Gasoline's most highly volatile components will eventually evaporate over time. As these components evaporate, the fuel's ability to combust will degrade, and the fuel will actually become thick, kind of creamy, milky-like, causing poor engine performance, and it'll clog the internals of your carbs. So here's a tip for you. If you plan to leave your vehicle, your car, even if anything, sit for an extended period of time, you should fill the gas tank all the way to the top and add a good fuel stabilizer. As the temperature rises and falls, especially if you're in a cold climate, if your tank isn't topped off to the top, a lot of this fuel will allow condensation to form in the tank, and that condensation will obviously form water and it'll mix with the fuel. So when you go to start your car a few months later, it's probably going to run really bad if it starts at all. So now that we know why carburetors need to be rebuilt, let's start tearing them down and inspecting them for damage. So first thing you want to do is take your carburetor. This particular carb is off of a jet boat. And the first thing you want to do is inspect and make sure there's no any visual damage on the outside of the carburetor. Obviously, if you took it off carefully and if everything was working before you took it off, there shouldn't be anything wrong with it. So the first thing I'm going to do is start on the fuel pump side of the carb. This is your fuel pump side. It actually says fuel pump on it. This actually pulls vacuum from the motor and actually pulls fuel through the carburetor. So there's 4 bolts holding this on. I've already removed 2 of them to save time a little bit. So I'm going to take these screws off. And as I take these parts off, I like to take them off and put them in a line exactly in the order that I take them off. That way when I go back to put them back together, they just go back on the same way that they came off, and I don't have to hunt around for parts or figure out what went where. So take the O-rings off, take the fuel pump block off, and then there's some little gaskets and stuff that come off. Keep those in order. Remove all the O-rings, and this carburetor has an internal fuel filter in it, which obviously you can see is quite dirty. Now that we've gotten that side off, flip the carburetor over to the other side and you'll see the diaphragm side. This side is also held on with 4 screws. So I'm going to remove these. The main key here is cleanliness and attention to detail. You want your area to be very clean and keep everything in order. Try not to lose any parts. So we're going to remove that with the accelerator pump. And on this particular carb, the diaphragm is here, so you're going to remove the diaphragm. And you'll see the internals of the carburetor. Take your screwdriver and take them apart. For some people, if it's your first time, it helps if you take some pictures before you take it apart. That way you know you're putting it back together right. Once that's done, you can take out your pilot and your main jet. You want to remove those. And once that's completed, you'll want to go to the side of the carburetor and you'll find your high speed adjuster and your low speed adjuster. There should be 2 screws. They're probably made of brass, so they're going to be a goldish color. You want to completely remove those in order to clean this carburetor really good. So once you've gotten that apart, you want to take it and you want to visually inspect it and find any contaminants or buildup or debris, and you want to scrape that off with a scraper or preferably a toothbrush if it'll come off. So I've already cleaned this one, so it's already pretty clean, but I did have to do a little bit of scraping. So once that's all cleaned up, you want to work on the passages of the carburetor. There's lots of little passages that run all around the carburetors on both sides and where you removed your high and low speed jets, and you want to spray those with good carb cleaner. Really get in there and make sure they're not clogged. If you have access to an air compressor, that'll help out a lot as well. So once you've ensured that your carbs are completely clean, you've cleaned out all the internals and you've scrubbed them down really well, it's time to replace all your old gaskets with your new rebuild kit. The rebuild kit should come complete with new gaskets and everything you need to put them back together. So I'll usually start on the side you took off and just work your way opposite the way you took them back off. So put this back together, put the diaphragm back on, your new diaphragm, put the assembly back on just like that, screw it back down, start on the fuel pump side, replace the O-ring, place your inline fuel filter, or your internal carburetor filter I should say, and then replace all the gaskets in the exact order that you took them off with the new gaskets. Now a lot of these gaskets you could easily interchange and put them on the wrong way, so double check your work and make sure you're putting them on the correct way. So once you get them all back together, you want to double check your work and make sure all the gaskets, triple check, make sure they're all correct, because if you have even one of these gaskets on wrong, it can cause your engine to run lean and it'll probably melt down a piston, or anything worse, could throw a rod through the block. So now you want to go back and put your 2 adjusters on, place your high and low speed adjusters, and your manufacturer's specs are going to have what they recommend setting these at. So you want to screw them all the way down, and then they'll say probably like 1 turn out. On this particular carb it says unscrew 1 turn on the lows and 1 1/4 turn on the highs. So you'll screw them all the way down and then back them out 1 turn on the lows and a turn and a half on, or turn and a quarter on the highs. So once it's completely back together, you want to visually inspect your work area, make sure everything's really clean, you didn't forget to put anything back in, and that's pretty much it. So congratulations, you've just completed your first carb rebuild. It's a really easy procedure, so someone with limited mechanical experience could easily complete this task. I mean, the main keys is just pay attention to what you're doing, keep everything in order, and keep everything really clean, especially internals of the carbs. By taking some time and researching the carbs and learning how to rebuild them yourself, you could save yourself thousands of dollars, plus you could do this at the beginning of every season and have a perfectly running vehicle. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed my speech and learned how to rebuild a carburetor.